Well, thank you very much for this warm welcome at JFocus. Welcome to the talk about Vue.js, developer-friendly, fast, and versatile. Yeah, I do have stickers, just in case I forget at the end. You can come down here and grab some from the table. And maybe if there's any other sticker that's interesting for you that's on my laptop, Java stickers, for example, different Java projects, just talk to me. I might have some in my box here. All right. This is the agenda for, well, the next about 40, 50 minutes. There's, well, what to expect from Vue.js and JavaScript frameworks in general, how to get started with Vue.js, well, how to set up projects, how to structure components and the project itself. We also look into performance and some lessons learned from my previous projects. Yeah. Just a quick of hands, who has been using Vue.js already? Yeah, all right. Who is planning to use Vue.js or heard of it before this talk? Oh, there's some, right? Okay, I hope I don't mess it up. If I do so, or if I don't do so, just talk to me afterwards. Well, I'm an IT consultant working for a company called MSG that's based in Germany, but well, we are now in 25 countries. Well, not in Sweden, unfortunately, yet. I'm a Java developer by heart for lots of years, but I have also done other programming languages like PL/SQL, and JavaScript. I've been working in consumer finance. I've done online banking, so a lot of people using web applications. Well, married, 2 kids, and a geocaching hobby. Big, expensive satellites in space, tracking small boxes hidden all over the world. And the slides of today, I already tweeted them about, if it worked out 3 minutes ago. You can have a look at the slides afterwards or during the talk. Right. So let's go back to the agenda. Expectations. Well, boring is good for your health, right? So you want to build great applications, but you don't really want to bother about the framework or how to use the framework, or you don't want to be super heroic to be a JavaScript developer. So there are just too many JavaScript frameworks out there. There's a JavaScript fatigue that you don't want to listen to the news anymore. But on the other hand, you're tired of not picking a framework because, you know, if you want to deliver a good user experience, you have to choose a JavaScript framework to make this all work. And the life expectancy of your application is hopefully longer than the hype cycle of the JavaScript framework that you're about to pick. So, well, my company and the project that we've been doing, we looked at different frameworks, and we found Vue.js. We found that it's an easy-to-learn JavaScript framework, even for Java developers like me. And for JavaScript newbies, it gave us productivity in our day-to-day work, in our previous projects. It doesn't have rough corners and edges that lead to problems because they're easy to grasp concept and difficult to get them wrong. And it has stable APIs. Well, Vue.js 2, it appeared in September 2016. And from there on, there has been only minor upgrades. So we're now at 2.5, if I'm not mistaken. And well, there have been refinements and improvements and features added, but it didn't break the API. And I will later on talk also about the migration from Vue.js 1 to Vue.js 2 that we did with our projects. So how to get started with Vue.js? Well, there's online documentation, and the online documentation is really, really great. You just pick, well, the version of Vue.js you're about to use, so that's usually Vue.x. You browse through the documentation, and in some places you might find features that have been added in a minor release, so that will be outlined in the documentation, but there's one piece of documentation for all Vue.js 2. This also talks great length about how stable the API is. The other thing to get started, well, there are books around. Just to get into the topic, you might have something that you want to read in a kind of linear way, put under your pillow or pass on to new developers that are then joining your project. So there's a book at LeapHub called The Majesty of Vue.js 2. There also has been the second volume covering the second major release of Vue.js. That's also a good thing to get started with Vue.js and the concepts in there. And then, I don't know who's been come across this pink sunglasses before. That's the logo of the awesome lists. The awesome lists that cover very, very different topics for different frameworks. And there's also an awesome Vue.js list. So it's covering all basically the good things about the Vue.js ecosystem. Find out about libraries, component libraries, things that work well with Vue.js. So that's a good. These are the three main sources I would recommend for you to get started with Vue.js. Well, so that's something to read, but you also need some tools to get started, to actually do some programming. So the tools, there's a command line interface tool for Vue.js to get you started, Vue CLI. It gives you a starter project with a complete build chain. There are different starter applications that you can pick from. You can pick from either using Webpack or Browserify to mingle all your JavaScript stuff together and pack it. You can start with a simple project, or you can pick a full-featured project with hot reloading, linting, testing, and the progressive web app. Progressive web app gives you full offline functionality in your JavaScript code. And this sets up a new project in no time, and you don't need to learn, at least to get started, not so much about Webpack and everything else there is. And then there are plugins for IDEs. There's a plugin for Vue.js by JetBrains for the JetBrains ecosystem. So if you're using IntelliJ, PHP Storm, WebStorm, whatever, you get a plugin into your IDE, and that's what we also use in our projects. And there's the plugin for VS Code as well. So you have very good support for Vue.js when you're doing your development. And well, the third thing you want to know about is then a plugin for Chrome. So where you have the web developer tools for Chrome, you then have a new tab that gives you information about running Vue.js application in your browser, and you can inspect all the components and the data that is in these components as well. And that will be part of the hopefully working live demo in a few minutes. Yeah, so we have something to read, something to code. Let's get started and dive into the concepts. Please do ask questions during the talk if you want to. So there's core functionality and extensions, like for any other framework. The core concepts of the Vue library that you includes view binding, how to show something on a web page, input binding, how to get data back from input fields, event binding, how to react on buttons being clicked and elements being clicked. You have conditionals, loops, you have templates, components mixed into reuse code, transitions, lifecycle hooks, computed stuff. So this is all, well, what the most important things we use in our projects to do Vue.js projects. And then there are additional packages that are, at least the ones that I list here, they're part of the official Vue.js project and maintained by the core team. Routing, meaning, okay, if I navigate between parts of my application and the URL changes in the browser, there's a Vue router project. Something that I've never used because I use it only for, well, real front-end stuff, and that is just running in the browser, but you can pre-render the JavaScript things on the server side using Node.js, stream that, pre-render to the browser, rehydrate it, so load all the JavaScript stuff, and this gives you a very nice user experience that the first page is rendered very fast. Also something that comes with Vue.js if you want it. It's there, but you don't have to use it. There's also TypeScript. If you want to use Vue.js with TypeScript, you can, but you don't have to. And the support for TypeScript improved quite a lot over the time with Vue.js. So you might want to look into it, but you don't have to use it. Another thing that is probably a common theme to Vue.js, you can do, but you don't have to, is the thing with JSX templates. People who might have looked into React and other things, you write JavaScript to produce HTML. Yes, you can do that with Vue, but the standard way to do it is use HTML templates that are then precompiled, and the precompiled templates are working just like JSX templates, but at least from my point of view, and in my environment, I'm happy to receive an HTML template and then use that in my code without converting that to JavaScript executables. Also, if you say, well, I want to have a global data model with a Flux React style application, there's Vuex, another extension to Vue from the core developers. Yes, you can do Vue.js applications in the Flux React style, but you don't have to, right? So the things that I cover in today's talk are now highlighted in red. We look at some parts of the core functionality and also into routing. And I would say this gives you, that might cover a lot of application that you're about to write. The applications we wrote are usually covered by these. Mostly covered by these things that I highlighted here. So let's get started. Let's look at some real code. Already at slide 10. So it's a JavaScript framework, and you have to initialize it. So you have to put it on a web page. Right? So what we see here on the right is a snippet of a HTML page, and in this HTML page, you have to define the area that Vue.js should be responsible for. So you basically pick out one DOM element in your web page and give it an ID and say, okay, in this area I want to display all the things that Vue.js is being displaying. Then you have to load the Vue.js application, the Vue.js JavaScript library. We're not using Webpack here, but in a later example. And then you have to initialize Vue, and you have to tell Vue, okay, in this DOM area, so you link these two together, the app here and the app here, and yeah, then you're done. Then you have a running Vue.js application in your browser. But it's not doing so very much yet. Let's dive into the concepts of Vue input and event binding. So the first thing here, we have a template in here. That's, in this case, part of the web page with this ID app. So I have a message in here that's being displayed. Whatever is then as part of my model that we see here on the right, the message that's part of the model is being displayed where this placeholder in the two curly brackets is. So that's Vue binding. And whenever something changes in the model, also the data displayed is being changed. I also have input binding. So the data that is part of my model, the message, is being displayed in this input field. And whenever something changes in the input, an event is triggered that is then, as default, updating my model. But I can also intercept that event to do maybe some validation or firing of other stuff. And I do have a button. And once I click this button, there's going to be an event, the onClick event, and I bind this onClick event to a method within my Vue component here. So all this functionality basically, gets you started, and you don't need any more jQuery, for example. So how does this actually look in real life? So this is now my application here. I can start typing here, and once the input changes, it changes the model, and the model is bound to the view over there. So that's fine. I can also click the button to reverse this message. So it's spelled backwards. And once I reverse it, it's done again what has been here from the beginning. And I also have conditionals that when I delete it, I can show a conditional text. Yeah, so we've seen also a conditional in here. So they are easy to learn concepts, and they are difficult to get them wrong. So that's a good thing about Vue. Right. So maybe this is all you need to enhance a web page, to add some JavaScript in there, to show a small widget here in a web page. But as projects grow and you have a bigger application that you want to run in your front end, and you want to break it down into components to structure it a bit more, and then you can go the next step, right? So how does a standard project structure look like? To create such a structure, use the command line interface for Vue. You install it using npm, probably globally, and then you have the Vue CLI package, and then you can type Vue in it and give it a template name to use. And this gives you a standard project structure with all the build tools basically pre-configured and up and running. There are lots of configuration files that are pre-filled that you can tweak later if you want to use specific features of either Babel or Webpack or whatever you are about to use in your project. But the main things that you see here are you have a folder for your assets, like logos to be displayed. You have a folder for your components that are then interacting in a way and help you to structure and modularize your application. You have a router that is then directing, making the navigation possible between all these components, and some 3 files that basically start the application, initialize everything you have with main.js, and then index the HTML. Right. And if you want to use that for development, you say npm install to download, well, half the internet with lots of node modules, well, like you do for Maven. And then you say npm run dev, and you have an up and running development environment with live reloading. Something I always wanted for Java, but well, JavaScript people have it. Let's see. So I've done this, and I have now, let's close this one. Yeah, so this is the project that I have here. I also have this components in here, so I can dive into these. I have syntax highlighting in here. I see my JavaScript. I see my HTML. That's nice. And yeah, as I said, npm run dev. Hopefully I did, yeah. And I have my samples up and running. I have my slots in here, so that's nice. And I also can see my developer tools here. So this is my Vue application here. I can, this is my root element, this is my app element. I have some components in here. I can inspect them. I see the data that is in there in the model. Also some computed fields in here. So that's really nice. Right. Yeah, this was the right one. So this gets me started. And something that you might have seen in my IDE just a second ago, there are single file components in Vue. Something that might sound scary, but well, with Vue we put HTML, JavaScript, and CSS in one single file. The idea about this being, it gives you a good idea what is actually happening in the page. If you are then changing the HTML, you're probably also changing the JavaScript and vice versa. So in a normal workflow, you would be actually changing 2 files if you have them separate. If you put everything in one file, it's one file you change. And we also have a scoped CSS. The CSS that you write here will affect only the HTML that is in this file, because it's scoped to that component, if you want to be scoped. And that's a cool thing. And the IDE, that's where you then need the plugin, gives you syntax highlighting for each of these 3 parts. The HTML is being highlighted like HTML. The JavaScript is highlighted like JavaScript. And you can actually navigate between these 3 parts. You can, yeah. So let's see how that works here. This is the first example that I showed. This is the other example. Yeah, I have some JavaScript here. I have some links here. I can click in here and go to the JavaScript, and yeah. So it just works like someone would expect in a modern IDE. And once you've broken down your application into components, you want to navigate between these components. And in a small application, it might be just the case that each route leads to one component. So you can break down your application into components. At some point, you say, okay, on the main page, I add a router view. That is then the place where the different components are initialized. And at another place, at the root.js file, in this case, we define, okay, there's different paths, and we give them a name as well. And we also say to what component this should be routed. So I have routes here. I can switch between these. And if I look into my developer tools, I also see that the component changes here, and it gives you, well, a preview of what will be happening in this, what we will see in the rest of the presentation, right? So that's good. And what you can also do in Vue, what's part of the core, well, I've been building a business application for quite a long time, and transitions are not something I need very often. But transitions are in Vue.js, and you can do transitions, for example, for a router view that I have here. So once I uncomment in my template, I'm getting mixed up here. Once I uncomment this transition in here, and as I have hot reloading, I save the template here, and the browser is reloading it. I get a transition in here. And there are different kinds of transitions in here. We can use CSS transitions and say, okay, what should happen when this enters, when this leaves? And there are different kind of transitions that you can also do with now looking at the Vue.js online documentation, SVG, things that you can animate here. There are things that you can animate like numbers that you can increment fluently. Yeah, there are lots of stuff that you that you can actually animate using these transition in Vue.js. And there's also a talk from Sarah Drasner at Software Engineering Daily. She was interviewed there, and it's about a 1-hour podcast that you can listen to. She also describes why transitions might be a good thing for your application, and also why she's so fascinated and using Vue a lot. Right. So just in case this didn't work, this demo, we have a recording in here. All right. Yeah. But then maybe this is all you need for your application. Break down your application into some components, make some routes in there, and you're done. But at some point, you might want to break down a page to different subcomponents and organize them in a parent-child relationship way. So the idea being, well, with Vue, we have this unidirectional data flow. So in one direction, you pass on data from the parent to the child, and you have events that are being created by the child that the parent can listen to. So data being passed down, that's called props. And, well, the thing that the parent listens to are then the events. And what I did here, I, for example, created a custom button. So the idea being, once when I initialize my component, the parent component, I import this click button as a child component, give it a name, use it like any other HTML tag, and well, I can pass down data that could be part of my model. I can also here pass down just a string for the label of the button. And once something is clicked in this child component, I want to receive a custom event, for example, to increment the counter that we see. Yeah. And inside the child component, I have, that's just like any other Vue component with not necessarily new concept. The only thing that I can see here, I can define what to expect, what's then being passed down as props from the parent, and the events that I emit, I can event with this dot dollar emit click button, and this is then the same event that is being listened to in the parent. And what we also see now in our example application, we have this parent-child thing. I can click in here. Now you see the parent-child relationship. That's also part of the Vue developer tools here. I can look into the click button here. The labels being passed down, being clicked here. I can actually in the parent, there's the counter. And once I click in the parent, and I click in the child, the parent receives that event and increments the counter. So I can also, in the Vue developer tools, analyze all the events that have been emitted here and inspect them and look at the payload, so you can actually send more data to the parent and add data to this event. So this gives you quite a good communication when you then try to or start creating reusable components in your application. But again, maybe you get away without it. And then if you can get away without it, please do so. But as I said, we used it in our application to do some reusable components. For example, things like menus or buttons, things you reuse throughout your application. And then there's another thing. If you have reusable components, something you can pass on data to them and ask them to render them, so that's fine. But at some point, you might override some of the templates that the child uses. Maybe there are some Java developers in here who used facelets. Let's look how this thing works in JavaScript. So the parent passes down. So the child defines some slots, and these slots can be filled by the parent if the parent wants to override them. So what I did, I wrote a small custom component for using for definition list. So you always have a term and a description here. And well, the child defines a standard rendering, so it just writes down the term and the DT and the description in the DD. But if the parent wants to override that slot, maybe add a prefix like we did here, add the T here, or wants to format it differently, it can pass down its own sub-template that will be used in that right place. That's very handy, for example, if you're building a table, a custom table that uses standard layout, so whatever you pass in a cell will be rendered as probably, I don't know, left adjusted text or right adjusted text, but we then can go there and say, okay, I have a special field that I want to format it as an image that should be pulled somewhere or should be centered. You then provide for that one cell a template that is rendering it differently from the parent. And it's still a reusable component with something you can override once you need it. So this is the core. And this got us quite far with our applications. Well, we were able to structure them. We had easy to grasp concepts for our developer. Because we broke our application down into components, we were able to find our way around and maintain not only our own code, but also the code somebody else wrote. Also very important. And yeah, we finished our project, and that's good. But let's look at performance. Performance during development. Performance is not only in runtime, but during development when you say you want to have online resources and few concepts for learnability. And this gives you good performance and onboarding new developers, starting new projects. You also want to comprehend the code that other developers wrote. I think the single file components are a good thing, and we used them in our project extensively, and it worked. You have very, very fast round-trip development. You have hot reloading in development mode. You might have seen when I changed this template, it reloaded this change into the browser. It also works for the JavaScript code and everything. You just press save in your IDE, and the browser updates. That's very cool for development. And we also looked at this Chrome developer tools. It gave us insight to the components, to the state. You can actually edit the state manually if that's something that helps you debugging problems into your application. We can look into also if you would use Vuex for state management, you can also look at the different state changes in there. So that's really, really cool. But after development, well, there's always production. So that the only stumbling block, something that's also outlined in the documentation, is, well, we have this view binding and propagation of changes. This only works, well, if you change a property, you don't have to think about it, just change it, assign a new value, that just works. Something, if you add a new property to your model, after the component has been rendered and loaded, you need to use view.set to add it. So that's something, yeah, people stumble upon, but that's something you probably should know when you're building your own application. But that's the only thing that came across, it just worked for us. So load times and rendering. Vue.js is quite small. It's 20K if you minify it and rezip it. It has no other dependencies. The templates, if you use Webpack, are pre-compiled when you build your application and prepare it for production. So you don't need this template compiler to ship that to the browser. You also save the time of compiling these templates and do that at build time and not when it's running in the browser. Well, because we have this, there's a virtual DOM involved, there's a very efficient change tracking involved here. We found us that we didn't need to do any optimization for any rendering. We even had big planning tables we had a big planning process in one of our applications for a whole year, where you can see what happens there and there. So yeah, and it has great performance benchmarks. I linked a performance benchmark in here by Stefan Krause. So that's really, really nice to see. And actually, well, this is Javaland. That's the big German Java conference, community conference in Brühl, near Cologne. And this is actually written in Vue.js, and it's open sourced. So it's built, it's a web planner. It's fully responsive. Well, that's just CSS, isn't it? It's fully offline capable. It's built from the Vue.js PWA template. It supports single sign-on. It's fully internationalized. You have filters in there. And you have automated tests, something I didn't show today. The front end is about 4,500 lines of code, but including all the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that we wrote. And, well, it's open sourced at Yukon PWA. We previously had another web client that was built on Knockout, but we refurbished it and built it with Vue.js. But there you might pick up some other concepts that you might need into your Vue.js applications. We also try to make it as simple as possible for new people to join in and enhance that client. So we chose not to use Vuex, at least for now. So this is trying to use as minimal concepts as necessary to get this up and running. Right. And this is done from this application that we've just seen, saying how much space or how much load or byte load Vue.js is then taking. So you see this light, brown color. That's Vue.js, and we have a big visualization library in there that's even a lot bigger than Vue.js for a nice, very zoomable time frame in there. And on the blue, there's the code we actually wrote. So Vue.js is small and handy. Usually you have other stuff that you pack into the application that are quite a lot bigger than Vue.js. So some lessons learned for us. Expectations met. So we got our Java developers, including myself, fit for JavaScript. We were newbies, and we're still doing now a lot of JavaScript, but still. We developed a complex graphical user interface with a very good performance and in a maintainable structure. That's very, very nice for JavaScript frameworks that we managed to do so. The components really helped us structuring the development. We developed some shared components for navigation and tables. And well, we also went through the migration from Vue.js 1 to Vue.js 2. There are actually minimal Vue.js changes. There was an upgrade guide, so even when you're using Vue.js 1, you could anticipate the changes that were coming in Vue.js 2. And for the things that you couldn't anticipate in a way that you already built your Vue.js 1 application to be almost compatible with Vue.js 2, there was a helper script that you can run on your application and showed you, okay, you need to change this and that once you upgrade to Vue.js 2. And that's very cool. So they really cared about their developers when they brought out Vue.js 2. And they also already have plans for Vue.js 3. And I believe they will do a very good job with Vue.js 3 as well for migration. They even thinking about keeping the API stable for Vue.js 3, but just dropping some old browser support from Vue.js 2 to make it even faster and slimmer when you integrate it into your application. So benefits was, if somebody is still using Vue.js 1, Vue.js 2 gives you faster rendering and better warning and error messages during development, so that's very nice. And we actually had, it was more effort to actually upgrade Webpack than upgrading Vue.js. So there were more breaking changes in there. But with Vue.js, it was very, very well prepared, and a big thank you to the developers at Vue.js. These are the links of the different projects that I showed you today. That includes also the podcast with Sarah and the Yukon PWA project, where we then have a project that's a little bit bigger. The slides are already tweeted, and well, thank you very much. So we now have about, 10 minutes for questions. Questions from the audience.
What made you choose Vue.js over React and Angular, and what's the main differences compared to those frameworks? Why would you do Vue.js instead?
So the question was, why did we choose Vue.js and not React or Angular? At the time we were choosing that, Angular was in a state where we thought, we don't know when there's a new release. And they were, Vue.js 1 and Angular 1, Angular 2. It was hard for us to see where they're going, if you need to be super heroic to actually use a super heroic framework. They had this transition to TypeScript where we weren't so very sure of. And we actually really wanted to use HTML templates. So it was easier for us developers to work with designers, something that React was saying, well, that's bad. So that's where we actually ended up with Vue.js. Vue.js learned a lot from Angular 1 and 2, how to do things also from React. On the other hand, later on it gave a lot of things back, like animations to the community, and other frameworks learned from them. So yeah, I think for us it was the HTML templates that we still wanted to use. We weren't so sure about TypeScript at that time. Today I actually would say, yeah, give it a try with TypeScript, because Vue.js also now has very good support for TypeScript. You can use it, but you don't have to. Yeah, that's, I think, the main reasons. Another question? All right, thank you very much. Thanks for joining, and please pick up some stickers.